Hello, humans! I just lost my headset saying that. How are you, everyone? Welcome to Ellie 2.0 Radio. And now, including at its new time slot of 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on Saturdays, as part of a block of LGBTQ plus focus shows. I think it's a great concept, and I'm thrilled that this show is part of that wonderful block. Still trying to come up with a name for it, but stay tuned. Okay, as you know, what makes Ellie 2.0 Radio unique is that it's about idealism and idealists and people working to change the world for the better. Also making this show a little unique is moi, yours truly, because I am one of the relatively few transgender radio hosts in the entire world. So there you go. That and $3.58 will get you a cup of hot chocolate at Caribou. Okay, now for today's show, we have a great interview with someone who is as idealistic to his core. I mean, this man will go out talking about change and how the system is rigged. I'm talking about Pastor Dean Seal of Shepherd of the Hill Presbyterian Church in Chaska, Minnesota. We had Pastor Dean on a couple of years ago, but he is set to retire at the end of this month, and I wanted him back to talk about his incredible career and accomplishments. You will like, he is a very, very, very interesting human. And in the C block, I'll talk about my work as an idealist, which of course I always do. But here in the A block, where we are right now, as we always do, our featured idealist of the week comes to us from that incredible initiative, Americans Who Tell the Truth. So they've got a lot of idealists on their website, and I've been grabbing some people off their website. And we actually highlighted Americans Who Tell the Truth several months ago. We had the curator, the originator of that project on the show. A recent addition to the list of Americans Who Tell the Truth is a 23-year-old black woman named Zyahna Byrant. And I am pretty sure that you've never heard of Zyahna Byrant, but I can assure you that everyone listening, and I mean this, everyone listening to my voice is very well aware of Zyahna Byrant's idealism and idealistic act that she committed that has had a huge impact on contemporary American history. Here's the story. In the spring of 2016, Zyahna Byrant was a high school student in Charlottesville, Virginia. She'd always lived in the Charlottesville area, and as such, she was aware of the statue of Robert E. Lee on his horse that was prominent in a city park that was also named for Lee, the Lee Park. And as she recounted to Vice News, she was in the 5th or 6th grade when she started to learn the truth about slavery and the Civil War. Thank God. You know, I don't know if they're still teaching that, you know, in Virginia right now, okay? But she learned about it in the 5th or 6th grade, and it was at that point when she saw the Robert E. Lee statue in her hometown, it started to make her, to use her words, disgusted. Well, we all know this, right? Okay? Seeing tributes to enslavers and to those who wanted to destroy the United States to preserve slavery is indeed disgusting. It is. A few years later, Zyahna Byrant was a high school freshman, and in a class, she was given an assignment of, quote, how to make a change, unquote. It was at that point, when she was 15 years old, I'll say that again, when she was 15 years old, Zyahna Byrant came up with the idea to remove the Robert E. Lee statue and rename it, Lee City Park. What she did was she created a petition for the statue removal and renaming of the park. Her petition attracted great attention. And ultimately, now remember, she was 15 years old. Ultimately, the Charlottesville City Council created a commission on whether to remove the statute. There was also another statute in Charlottesville of Jackson, Stonewall Jackson on his horse, they were going to address that statute as well, okay? When the commission voted to remove the statute in 2017, that triggered the backlash that in May of 2017 had the hordes, and that's the right phrase, of white supremacists descending on Charlottesville, as you may recall. Now it's all coming into focus, right? Okay? That's the same horde that President Donald Trump, then President Donald Trump, referred to as, quote-unquote, fine people. It was called the Unite the Right rally and had white supremacists carrying the Tiki Torches. You remember that image? It is burned into my memory. It is one of the worst images of contemporary America that I can think of. The images were horrible and something that made most Americans sick to their stomachs, that disgusted them. There's that word again. You may also recall that there were counter-protests to the Tiki Torches, and that later that summer, in August, during another Unite the Right rally, there was a clash that broke out between the neo-Nazis, okay, the supporters of white supremacy, and humans who reject all of that, which I'm going to trust is going to be probably every listener to the show and podcast as I speak. Well, the clashes broke out, and you remember that on August 12th of 2017, a car driven by a neo-Nazi rammed into the crowd of counter-protesters and killed Heather Heyer. You remember that? Okay? And she was 32 years old at the time. She was an idealist. That is for sure. The car also injured another 35 people, 5 of them in critical condition. After that attack, the city council proceeded with its plans to remove the Robert E. Lee statute and the one of Stonewall Jackson. There was great wrangling with lawsuits in the Virginia legislature passing laws and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, Lee Park was renamed Market Street Park. And then in October of 2023, both of those statutes of Robert E. Lee and of Stonewall Jackson were taken to an undisclosed foundry and melted down into blocks of metal. It so pleases me to be able to say that. Blocks of metal. All of this began with a petition by a high school student named Zyahna Byrant. Wow. As a result of her work as an idealist, Zyahna received awards from Princeton and Yale universities. When she was 19, she published a book titled Reclaim: A Collection of Poetry and Essays. She's also been interviewed on CNN and by the New York Times and other leading, media outlets. The last report that I have is that Zyahna is a student at the University of Virginia. It's a name that you will not, she'll be back, okay? There'll be other things that she is going to do in this world. And I want to share with you some of her words. This was part of an interview that she gave that's reported in Americans Who Tell the Truth, but it was an interview that she gave to the nonprofit Teaching Tolerance. And this is what she said. Quote, "If we don't have people who are standing their ground and continuing to seek truth in this fight for justice, then people like me who are young, black, and female will continue to be marginalized in their own efforts. Another part of making the world better is acknowledging our past. Before we can heal as a community and as a nation, we must truly reckon with our past and call out white supremacy in all its forms." What I just read to you was from a young 20-something black woman in Virginia whose courage in promoting a petition to remove 2 statutes of enslavers and people who tore this country apart one way or another, quite idealistic. Now, I'm recalling, and you may remember, I've talked about this on the show before. I'm on the school board from my local school district, the Eastern Carver County Schools. For a long time, our schools graduated high school students at an evangelical church that was intolerant of LGBTQ people, intolerant of Black Lives Matter, and intolerant of people who are divorced. We're no longer doing that. We're no longer graduating there. This June, we'll be graduating. We have two high schools, both high schools, Chanhassen and Chaska, at Target Center, where the Wolves play. The reason for that change, the reason why we moved from Grace, that evangelical church, to Target Center, is because of a high school sophomore's petition presented to my school board. His name was Eli Frost. Is Eli Frost. I've had him on my show to compliment him for his courage. So as you sit back and think about the world today, and you think about all of the adults who are not acting like adults at all, will you remember that it is our young people who very well are idealistic young people who very well are changing the world? Okay, there you have it. Okay, that's our featured idealist for this week. Check out Zyahna Byrant and read up on her. She's got her own website. She goes and does speaking. I mean, it's kind of like rock star-ish. And so, all right, when we come back, we're going to do the big interview with Pastor Dean Seal from Shepherd of the Hill Church in Chaska, Minnesota. You're going to love his interview. Thanks for listening to me, Ellie Krug. If you like what you hear, visit my website at elliekrug.com. We'll be back in a second. And we're back, Ellie 2.0 Radio. So check out Zyahna Byrant, okay, because for a young person, she has absolutely rocked the world. And now, for the big interview, I've got somebody else who's rocked the world. I have with me Pastor Dean Seal, who is the retiring pastor from Shepherd of the Hill Presbyterian Church in Chaska. Pastor Dean, welcome. Welcome back to Ellie 2.0. We had you on the show about 2 years ago. I am thrilled that you are here and that you're back, and congratulations on retirement.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, Ellie.
Oh, and ditto back. So, Pastor Dean, why don't we give the audience a little bit about your background, because you got into the ministry in a fairly unique way, at a fairly unique age. And so why don't you start out where, how'd you get started in terms of some of your other endeavors, and then what got you into the ministry, and then we'll talk about all that you've accomplished since you've been out in Chaska.
Sure. It's not that unusual to come into the ministry later in life. There's a lot of second career people who have done other stuff and then decided, you know what, I need to do something that's a little more serious. I used to be in showbiz. I was in a comedy act called Mr. Elk and Mr. Seal. Some of our claims to fame are we sang La Bamba in Japanese, which got on America's Funniest Videos and was actually rebroadcast in Australia. We sang on the Prairie Home Companion. We did a pilot for HBO, which we shot at Paisley Park, which was a big fat bomb. And then I decided I didn't want to go into TV anymore, and went into the theater locally, where I ran the Bryan Lake Bowl Cabaret Theater. My big discovery there was Miss Richfield, 1981. And then I ran the Fringe Festival for about 4 years. And when I took it over, attendance was 4,400, and when I left, it was 28,000. And it's now the largest unjuried festival in the United States. But while I was doing that, there was just a point in time where I did not want to. I was a fan of Dr. King, and I was not a fan of the church because the church has a lot of problems, especially the Catholic Church. I grew up Lutheran, and the first thing you learn as a Lutheran is we're not Catholic.
There you go.
But the problems of the church, there's the pedophile scandals with the Catholic Church.
Yeah. There's
the fact that Catholics and a lot of evangelical churches don't ordain women, and but there's still Dr. King, and I said, okay, that's what it looks like when it works. And I had a guy who married my mom's cousin, who was a Lutheran pastor. He said, if you want to know what an Old Testament prophet looks like, look to Dr. King. And what prophet means there is, it's not a magic thing where they predict the future. It's someone who calls out a nation to live up to its own highest standards, and they speak truth to power. And, eventually they probably get killed if they're any good at it. So at a certain point, theater was what I was doing, but I went to the seminary, a United Theological Seminary, excuse me, which is in St. Paul, for a degree in theology and the arts. And there's, a church.
At what age did you do that?
It was 20 years ago when I graduated, so I was 48.
Okay, all right.
Well, I was 45 when I started.
Okay.
There's a church service is a theatrical experience, and both theater and church service are events that you create that you hope will carry meaning. And both of them use storytelling, and music is like the original form of spiritual expression. So, excuse me, there's a lot of crossover between what I was doing and what the tools that were available for trying to create meaning moving forward. And there were, a couple of times when, I'd go to a funeral and I'd go, God, I could do a better job than this guy. And also very many sermons where I go, oh man, it's like Louis Anderson at an open stage. He just said, I'm funnier than this guy. And his buddy said, well, why don't you go up there? And he went up there, and he was funnier than that guy. So I first got into it doing interfaith work. Dr. King was an interfaith guy. He was a fan of Gandhi, who was a Hindu.
He was.
And Gandhi was an interfaith guy. He was a fan of Jesus. He said that the Sermon on the Mount was the best piece of spiritual writing he'd ever seen. And the cool thing there is, excuse me, every religion says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But only Jesus said, love your enemy. Okay? And love your enemy is really hard. It's really hard. And so when Dr. King said, we must love the racist, I went, okay, I know where you get that, but how do you get there? How do you get to that? And he said, we must love the racist because racism is bad for them. Okay? So I went, okay, here's a really, really, really hard thing. And that's what I'm going to set myself up to do, is see how I can possibly love my enemy and move forward with that as the working principle. Okay.
And so you go to the seminary, and then did you get when was it that you came out to Shepherd of the Hill in Chaska?
It took a while. I got a Master of Theology in the Arts, and then I stayed on for another year and got a Master of Divinity. Then for 2 years, I did interfaith work with a thing called Spirit in the House, a nonprofit I started, where I did kind of a replica of the Fringe, only it was all spiritual performance, and it was, Hindu and Buddhist, and we had some not vegan, what's like Celtic spirituality stuff.
Okay.
We had an event where we had Jewish and Muslim musicians who were from Iran, and they were playing Iranian music that was both Muslim and Jewish. It was really cool stuff.
Yeah, it sounds great. Great imagination, too.
Yeah, and there were art exhibits. Like there was this art exhibit of the Forgiveness Project.
Yep.
Forgiveness is an interfaith concept. It's something that's how you can start any conversation. You say, okay, what do you people say about forgiveness? So there's like an art exhibit where they have like the daughter of a British politician who was murdered by the IRA, and the guy from the IRA who murdered him, and they would have conversations about how does forgiveness work.
Yep. Yeah, I've actually highlighted the Forgiveness Project before on Ellie 2.0 radio. Yep.
Yeah, well, that's really cool.
It is.
And so we would do an art exhibit with the Forgiveness Project stuff and a play about forgiveness. And there's like an art installation. Excuse me. This guy named Doug Padilla took a bunch of small trees, and dead trees, and painted them white, and took a coffee can and painted it white and put in white stones. And then he'd stick the trees in this coffee can. Instructions on the podium said, tie either a white thread or a golden thread onto one of the trees as an act of forgiveness. And so this was an installation that was there for 2 weeks, and just in Concordia College in St. Paul. And at the end of the 2 weeks, there were hundreds of threads tied to the trees.
Oh.
So it was an interactive art exhibit about forgiveness. It was really cool.
So you've got all of this going on informing your work as a pastor, yes?
Well, yeah, I was ordained to interfaith work.
Okay.
Normally in the Presbyterian Church, you're ordained into a church, but there's a thing called a specialized mission. It'd be like a food shelf or a mission to immigrants or something. Mine was an interfaith mission. And after 2 years, I couldn't figure out how to make a living at it. I didn't know how to raise money. So I started teaching at Augsburg College part-time as an adjunct, and I taught religion. And then I also did, my wife and my kid and I would teach movie camp with kids. We'd make a movie out of a parable, and my wife would teach them improv classes and stuff like that. And some of them was with young kids from the St. Joseph's Home for Children, which was a locked ward.
Yep.
And so we would do movie camps with those guys, and they'd make a movie in a week, and there was some very special moments like that with the kids having a kind of a experience about self-worth and self-value.
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah, and then eventually I was told that Shepherd of the Hill was looking for a pastor, and they hadn't found anybody yet, and that I should apply. And I said, okay. So I applied, I was interviewed, and they hired me part-time. It's a part-time job. It's a small church. So I worked at Augsburg part-time, and I worked at Shepherd of the Hill part-time.
What year was this that you started out at Shepherd of the Hill?
9 years ago.
Okay. All right. But you at Shepherd of the Hill, I mean, I think our audience members need to know that, I mean, the church is located on the corner of Highway 41 in Engler. It has a huge red chair, wooden chair in the front lawn, and it has 3 flags, if I remember. Yep. You've got the U.S. flag. You've got. I know you have the LGBTQ flag there. So
we have the LGBTQ flag updated to have transgender triangle on it, and the Black Lives Matter flag, and the Presbyterian Church USA.
Okay.
Now the Presbyterian Church USA ordains gay people and marries gay people and ordains women. So we're a progressive congregation. We're a progressive denomination, and we're small. There's only 1.5 million PCUSA members in the United States. But other denominations will ordain women and gay people and marry them, like the ELCA Lutherans, the Episcopal Church, the Moravian Church, and the UCC. These are our allies in Chaska. So the 4 of us, the denominations, do stuff together, and I've really enjoyed doing that with them. But most of the churches, it's kind of a litmus test. If they don't ordain women, then, what are you doing there? Right? Because they don't treat women as equal citizens. They don't think women are as spiritual as men. They don't think women are as smart as men. I disagree.
Well, and in Chaska at Shepherd of the Hill, I mean, you made it an instrument of social change. Can you talk to us about what you did, or maybe they were continuing? You know, those programs were there, but I know that you've done more to beef things up and to strengthen them. So could you talk about what you were doing from like a social justice, social change standpoint at Shepherd of the Hill?
Well, the cool thing is that they were that way when I got there. They had a big investment in a thing called Families Moving Forward, which was organized by about like a dozen churches, and it grew to about 30 churches, where they would take homeless families and let them sleep in the church for a week, and the congregation would feed them and help them get their lives organized, and then they moved to another church and another church. And that was in place, and I thought, this is really cool, because homelessness is a national crisis.
Yep.
And we have to raise people's ideas about, this is a problem that can be solved. If the United States spent $20 a year on new houses, have homeless people. Right. But we don't care enough about them. And, we were working with homeless children.
I know.
And you've worked in the school district. That's one of the cool things about Chaska, is that they hired you. And so, these kids don't deserve to be homeless. They don't deserve to be sleeping in their cars. So that was something that was there. And I said, okay, I'm in the right place. This is a progressive church that wants to do stuff. Okay. And they were a gay minister, but they couldn't find one. So they hired me instead. I'm a queer ally. I've done that in the theater and in the Bryant Lake Bowl, which was run by lesbians, and in the Fringe, which I encouraged gay performing groups to apply and, get out there and do stuff.
Yep. So, all right. So, but Chaska, we should say, is, it's kind of a blue island in what would be considered a red county, a Carver County that went for Trump by 6 in the 2020 election.
Yeah. But Chaska did not. Chaska went with, I don't know what they did in 2020, but I know they voted for Obama the first time he ran. And that was the first time they'd not voted for a Republican since Lincoln.
Yeah. Well, and, and the community as a whole is pretty diverse for greater Minnesota. I mean, it's got 23% identify not as of white of the skin color. And
one of the things our church does is it hosts a Seventh-day Adventist congregation, which is Central American refugee families. And they've just got a burst of new membership from Venezuelan immigrants. So, and they're a Spanish-speaking congregation, and we do something to host them. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to tell you. One thing I did bring in was an art gallery.
You did?
And the art gallery does about 4 or 5 shows a year. And for most of the last 5 years, every year at Christmas, I would do an interfaith art show. We would show art that was Muslim and Christian and Buddhist and Jewish and Native American. But it had to be spiritual in content. So we would do an interfaith art show. And that was a nice piece of progressive innovation.
Well, and your current art show is by an artist, and I'm forgetting his name, but he's got a great eye and great work. And in fact, I bought one of his paintings.
Thank you very much.
And
you're smart to do so. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is really great stuff. And paintings hanging in my entryway right now. It's the first thing people see when they come into my house. But I think it's great. You've got this venue that is multidisciplined in a variety of ways, with a mission, all geared. As soon as you walk into the church, it's so very clear. I mean, I go into a lot of places of worship, but your church, the Shepherd of the Hill, in particular, as soon as you walk in, you know that this is a mission-oriented, change-focused, social justice, place. And I just want to compliment you for that.
I'm glad you get that impression. And also, we host 6 Narcotics Anonymous meetings.
I know you do.
And we got them because during the COVID shutdown, we had one meeting. And after 2 weeks, they called and said, we need to meet. And we'd rather die of COVID than die from killing ourselves with narcotics. And I said, that makes perfect sense. Go ahead and meet. And then 5 other meetings said, our churches won't let us meet. Can we meet at your church? And I said, yeah. So those are people who are saving themselves and saving each other. And that's what the building should be used for.
So, Pastor Dean, you and I have had a number of conversations about idealism and about our respective heroes. And we share Dr. King for sure. And how I feel about Bobby Kennedy. And could you explain to our audience, what is it that made you, idealistic? As somebody interested in trying to make the world better?
I'm the 5th of 5 boys, and my third brother is named Gary Seal. He's an artist. He died a few years ago, but he was born developmentally disabled. And when you have that as part of your growing up experience, you understand that some people don't get to choose how much talent or skills that they have when they go out into the world. Now, the state of Minnesota is very progressive, and my brother was made a ward of the state, and there's an infrastructure to support him, housing and food and care and medical care, because there was no way he would do it, and he would be able to do it. He was a vulnerable adult. He could remember people's names, and he could read, but he couldn't remember anything he read. And he was actually a gifted artist. He spent about 14 years being an artist with the Interact Center for Visual and Performing Arts. He had a self-portrait in the Smithsonian.
Oh, my goodness.
And he has a piece in a book called Visual Theology as an outsider artist. But I understand, it was Hubert Humphrey who had a granddaughter who had Down syndrome that actually my brother was a friend with, who kind of installed in the Minnesota system, we're going to take care of these people. We're not going to kick them to the curb and let them die, which is what the Republicans would like you to do. Is anybody who's not fit, too bad for them, right?
Right.
So there's the public role in lifting people up, and also my mother was a teacher. She taught junior high. And for my father, who grew up on a farm, going to college was his way to lift himself up and get off the farm and get into a white-collar job where he could raise a family in the suburbs and put his kids through college. And so this idea of public education is instilled in us as a means by which people can learn and grow and improve their lives. So what we're seeing now is an attack on public education. We're seeing an attack on infrastructure for people who are helpless. We're seeing an attack on providing affordable housing. And I have a theory. I haven't done the math on this, but I think banks benefit heavily from homelessness because if there's a housing shortage, prices go up, mortgages go up, yep. And interest income from mortgages goes up. So if there was a plentiful housing, banks would be less profitable. And that's why I think we have a homeless problem.
Okay. Well, listen, Pastor Dean, our time is up. And I just want to say congratulations on retirement.
Thank you.
I wish you the very best.
Likewise.
And I hope that you and I stay in touch. Okay?
I hope so, too. Keep up the good work, Ellie. We need people like you pushing every week on the airwaves to make sure that these voices are heard.
I appreciate that. I really do. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Pastor Dean. It was great to talk with you here. All right, audience, when we get back, we're going to go to my C block where I'm going to talk about my work as an idealist. Pastor Dean Seal of the Shepherd of the Hill, we wish you the very best on the next part of your adventure. Everyone, you're listening to me, Ellie Krug, on Ellie 2.0 Radio. When we come back, the C Block.
This
And we're back. Ellie 2.0 Radio. Pastor Dean, just incredible. I adore that man. I really do. And I'm going to miss him. I am. I'm going to miss him from Chaska because, I could just drop in and see him. And he does not. He lives in Minneapolis, so that's not going to happen. But I'll stay in touch with him. You can be sure of that. All right, my C block, where I talk about my work, which unfortunately I do. What is this? January 11th. Let's see. I've given an interview. I've given a podcast interview, but that won't air till March. And I have no speaking engagements until I'm talking to a law firm at the end of the month online. That's it. Okay. But I've been using the time to write on my book, as I talked about last time. I'm up to 90,000 words. Relatively, some of them are great words, some of them are not so great, but we're getting there. What I want to talk about is what's going on right now in the country as it relates to trans people. You get that from me, and bear with me, okay? That's because my community doesn't have many platforms to get the word out. Now, you remember I had Erin Reed. She's a transgender blogger and columnist, and she does just the best job of keeping track of what's going on in our country politically as it relates to trans people. And here's what she reports, a couple of things. First of all, she reports that this time last year, in 2023, there are about 50 bills introduced because January 1 happens and then boom, the legislative season begins all across the country, okay? And even though maybe the legislatures aren't meeting, they can start introducing a piece of legislation. This time last year, there were 50 anti-transgender bills introduced across the country in various legislatures. This time last year. Now, I'm talking to you on January 11th, okay, for a show that will air on the I guess I'm talking to you on the 12th for a show that air on the 13th. Keep track, Ellie. This year, right now, number of anti-trans bills introduced in state legislatures, nearly 200. And the bills are becoming far more draconian. Far more. So, for example, in West Virginia, okay, just this week, number of bills introduced against transgender people. One of those bills is the Cure Trans bill. It will, if enacted in West Virginia, it would require that therapists and social workers and anybody else who's got a license, who's working with transgender youth and kids under age 21, okay? So forget about the 18 age of majority. This is under age 21. It would require that those therapists and social workers not, affirm these humans who are trying to make their way and figure out their identities and then live as who they truly are. It would require therapists and social workers and other licensed professionals to actually work to cure. That's the word. It's in the statute, the proposed statute, to cure youth and young people of being transgender, to cure them. In other words, to drive it out of them. Okay? I mean, that's called conversion therapy. It doesn't work, and it is incredibly harmful to anybody who undergoes conversion therapy. It is. And so, but now West Virginia wants anybody who professionally interacts with trans kids and youth to work to make them not transgender. I'm just here to tell you, it's not a choice, okay? Read my book, okay? It's not a choice. I thought I could choose to stay a man. I'm here to tell you it's not a choice. Some people just get wired the way we are. All right, so that's West Virginia. In Ohio, Ohio was faced with legislation that Ohio House and Senate passed a bill to ban gender-affirming care for anyone under the age of 18 in Ohio. And Governor Mike DeWine met with some transgender families and just said, I can't take the decision away from the families about how they're going to, support and love their transgender child as it relates to gender-affirming care, and then puberty blockers so their trans girls don't get this voice that you're listening to right now. He said, I'm not going to take that away from them, and he vetoed the bill. Just this week, on Wednesday of this week, the Ohio House overrode that veto, and the Ohio Senate on the 24th is going to vote, and they say they'll have enough votes to override the veto, and that'll make Ohio the 23rd state to ban gender-affirming care for youth and minors, okay, and children, all right? Yeah, all right? But DeWine wanted to kind of placate, his legislature. So even though he vetoed the bill about gender-affirming care, he had his administration draft up some administrative rules for the treatment of transgender humans, all transgender humans in Ohio. So this is not just about kids. This is for everybody who go. If I lived in Ohio, these rules would apply. And what the rules provide for is that any clinic that provides care to any transgender person, okay, any clinic, all right? So whether it's, a small clinic, whether it's part of a hospital, whatever it is, that they need to have a psychiatrist, an endocrinologist, and a bioethicist on staff. They need to have those three professionals on staff. Those three professionals need to then follow the transgender person. They need to do monthly reports. I think the reports get forwarded to the state. I mean, it is can you imagine that you have diabetes, all right? And Aaron Reed made this argument that you have diabetes, and the state says the only way that you can get diabetic medicine and treatment is if you see a specialist on diabetes. And by the way, there are only 5 of those specialists in the whole state, okay? Can you imagine the people are like, it's 8 months for you to get an appointment to go see, this specialist. And in the meantime, what do? You die because you can't get insulin, you can't get your prescriptions. This is what they're trying to do with these administrative rules in Ohio. It is unbelievable, okay? It is erasure of transgender people, and it's going to result in more suicides. But now there are going to be other states that are going to follow it because the Republicans are copycats. One state does something, then they all start to do it. All right, if I sound disgusted, I am. There you go. All right, a big thanks to my producer, Brett Johnson. Brett's had to do a little bit of math today for a change. And you, my listeners, I hope that you're enjoying this block of LGBTQ shows. Tell others about it, okay? Please continue to download my podcast because, I love it when people listen to what I have to say. And feel free to reach out to me at Ellie J. Krug, ELLIEJKRUG, @gmail.com. I love hearing from my listeners. And in between now and when you hear my voice next, will you do me something as a favor? Will you go out and do something to make the world better? Ellie Krug, Ellie 2.0 Radio, over and out.